I'm Derek Haseltine, Director of the Hertz Fellowship. I wear a few hats in this role. Most relevant to today's discussion is coordinating the selection process with our two chairs and our incredible group of selection volunteers. I also oversee the administrative side of the fellowship and liaise with our in-school fellows in their respective institutions. So joining me here today are three Hertz Fellows, Dr. Jane Wang, Bailey Flanigan, and Nikhil Bhattasali. And I would like to first just invite each to briefly introduce themselves. And Jane, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. It's a pleasure to be here today. The Hertz Fellowship, it feels like a long time ago, but it is always been and very near and dear to my heart. So really happy to be here to be able to speak about my experiences and maybe hopefully encourage those who are listening to apply.
Okay, I can go next. My name is Bailey Flanigan. I'm in my final year of my PhD in computer science. Um, and I've just really enjoyed the Hertz Fellowship. I'm excited to talk to you about it today. Um, yeah.
And
Hey
finally,
everyone,
Nikhil.
I'm Nikhil Bhattasali. I am a second year PhD student at NYU. I just got my Hertz Fellowship last year, and my research is in a mix of artificial intelligence and neuroscience.
Excellent. Thank you, Bailey, Nikhil, and Jane. And we're going to get to some great insights and advice from the three of them. I'm going to run through some administrative things very quickly. And I appreciate their willingness to be incredibly candid in today's discussion. So our goals for tonight, for the next hour or so, are to provide you with an overview of the Hertz Fellowship Program. We'll be sharing information about the application and the selection process, including tips on what to highlight in your application. And finally, we will open the floor to all of your questions. So we'll have a lot of fun in the open Q&A. Before we advance, I do want to remind everybody on the call that the 2024 application is now live. So if you haven't already done so, you can access the application today. And as a reminder, we are at the very front of the application. We have all the way till October 27th at 11:59 Pacific time on Friday. October 27th is when the application closed. Also, this session is being recorded. We will make this available on our website and our YouTube channel shortly afterwards. So wanted to kick off with an introduction to the foundation, to the Hertz Foundation. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit public charity, and our mission is the fellowship. The fellowship is aimed at identifying and supporting the nation's most promising science and technology graduate students in the fields of applied physical and biological sciences, mathematics, and engineering, whose creativity, talent, and ambition compels them to seek solutions to the country's greatest challenge. This investment in graduate students stems from the legacy of our founder, John Hertz, who believed firmly in investing in the country's education to improve the defense potential of the United States. John was an immigrant to the country and established the foundation and the fellowship as a way to give back to the country that afforded him so many opportunities while boosting our science and technical enterprise. The foundation's initial focus was on engineering students, but as you can see from our cohort of fellows, including several on the call, that's since broadened to support applied scientists in physical and biological sciences, math, and also engineering continued. From our website, if you're interested in learning more, if you haven't already done so, there's a directory of fellowship recipients, and you can from there see the diversity of scientific backgrounds that make up this highly impactful community. We're excited. This year, we're actually celebrating the 60th anniversary of fellowships awarded, and the Hertz community of fellows now exceeds over 1,200 fellowship recipients. And as you'll see, over the past decades, many of these have gone on to become leaders, shapers, disruptors in American science, engineering, and math, and essentially catalysts and executors of some of really significant progress in the past century. Again, from the website, you can learn a little bit more about some of these impact areas, whether it's energy, healthcare, technology, defense, from the impact link on the website. So the fellowship, the funding structure and resources available to fellows provides unique opportunities and benefits to young scientists at really the pivotal part in their career. And primarily among these is the freedom to pursue their own research ideas. So with up to 5 years of renewable independent funding deployed in the early stages of graduate school, Hertz Fellows are encouraged to pursue bold ideas wherever they may lead. This mechanism, the funding mechanism, frees financial constraints in overly narrow defined directions that might often be the case of existing research grants from a PI. And really, the fellowship is designed to empower students to think in daring new directions, pursue high-risk projects, collaborate across fields, or secure the advising that may not otherwise have been feasible through their own graduate program. So I want to pause for 1 second or a few minutes here and give Bailey and Nikhil just a chance, an opportunity to discuss how this research freedom has impacted their own career and graduate trajectories. So either of you can start.
Okay, yeah, I'll start. So yeah, so as I mentioned, my research is kind of in a mix of AI and computational neuroscience. And specifically under AI, I do robotics. I'm basically trying to take insights from animal brains and use it to build better robots. And as you can imagine, this is not a very common intersection. It's pretty interdisciplinary. So I feel like, you know, the Hertz has been really valuable here for me to be able to pursue this research. I'm co-advised. So one of my primary advisors is a roboticist. One is a computational neuroscientist. So, you know, I'm not really attached to any of their grants. I'm bringing my own money through the Hertz. And that's kind of afforded me tremendous latitude to kind of just like, you know, do my own thing. Yeah, research-wise.
Thank you. And Bailey, would you like to care to insert any comments?
Sure, yeah. I think I forgot to say this at the beginning, but what I work on is also kind of a weird intersection. It's theoretical computer science and democracy. And so one of the things that the Hertz Fellowship has like really given me in my PhD is around my second year, I realized that I had this intuition that I really wanted to work on deliberation, which is like part of democratic processes sometimes, but it's like a frontier in our field. And I think a lot of people like didn't really know exactly what the right way to approach the problem was. And so I spent a year and a half, perhaps to my advisor's dismay, publishing nothing while I just like explored the topic a lot. And I could not have done that if I didn't have the Hertz Fellowship. And ultimately what came out was an agenda that I'm now like really excited about. And I decided to apply for a faculty job because I'm so excited, but I could never have had that freedom if I was on a grant. And then also I spent a semester at the Simons Institute at Berkeley, which is like a really amazing like germination place for theory and math and physics. But I only could do that because I was funded by the Hertz, and that funding went with me. And that was also a really pivotal part of my graduate school experience.
Thank you, Bailey. Thank you, Nikhil. Jane, I don't know if you wanted to add anything, just reflecting back on your own graduate experience. I know we're gonna save you for the interviewing piece, the really juicy details around interviewing. But if you wanted to chime in anything about pursuit and freedom to innovate as it related to your own research training.
Yeah, I think, you know, maybe I started off my PhD not taking advantage of this as much, but toward the end, I fully embraced it. I was the first student in a 3-lab collaboration. My training during my PhD was actually in synthetic organic chemistry, which is fun, but can be dry. And so I branched out from there. I did supramolecular chemistry. I did enzymes with supramolecular chemistry, with transition metals. And like I said, 3-lab collaboration, right? That would have been very, very hard to structure around if I were tied to funding. I'm really proud to say that I was the first student in this kind of collaboration, but the professors actually kept the program and it still exists today. And so, you know, this is more than 10 years later. So really happy to see that this freedom to innovate from the Hertz like actually had a lasting impact in the labs that I came from.
Great, thank you, Jane. I so appreciate you chiming in on that as well. And I see a couple of questions rolling into the chat box. We'll get through this pretty quickly, and we have a lot of time for Q&A. So feel free to enter those questions, but we'll kind of couch those in, until the end. So we heard about co-advising. We heard a lot about research. The other thing I did want to mention, it might seem a little trivial, but also worth noting for Hertz Fellows, there's protection in terms of extra teaching. So through our agreements with our partnership institutions, our fellows are restricted only to teaching requirements that are required from their program. And this essentially helps free any unnecessary time that can be spent pursuing research otherwise. So we do realize that several of our fellows do enjoy teaching, and we support that. But we always want to ensure it's in their best interest and not necessarily something that's forced upon them and they're doing a lot of teaching so they can free up that time for research. So in addition to research independence, Hertz Fellows have access to a one-of-a-kind, multi-generational community of science and tech leaders that essentially provides invaluable opportunities for mentorship and for collaboration. This network is really a critical source of support and encouragement when navigating the difficulties of graduate school and also advancing careers afterwards. So the Foundation's community efforts are led by our staff member, Ann Cornarens, and a council of volunteer leaders that host events throughout the year, including some really unique geographic specific networking opportunities that have really cropped up over the last year, where we have volunteer community reps in some of these markets that are hosting social activities, bringing in speakers, research-related activities. Some went and saw Oppenheimer together because there are ties to the Hertz Foundation there as well. These activities are also detailed in a lot more detail on our website. As I alluded to, access to this community provides tremendous benefit for fellows' professional development. If you look at our news feed, you'll see countless success stories of collaborations, and these can range anywhere from publications together to formation of companies from Hertz Fellows. And it's interesting if you pinpoint it to some of the origins of these collaborations, it's oftentimes these organic networking or social activities from a retreat or a summer workshop or a meetup. The network, the Hertz community is a valuable source also for internship opportunities for our in-school fellows, job leads for our career fellows, and also mentorship really across the board. So just a few weeks ago, we had our summer workshop. This is our annual community event. This was in San Diego, and we brought together both our in-school and our alumni community. It was highlighted by talks from leaders in various science and tech capacities. And it also included a volunteer research showcase where fellows could talk about their work to the broader community. And it was super exciting to see about half of the participants in that were 2023 fellows. So these are brand new fellows just getting into the fellowship, presenting their work in front of decadal cohorts of Hertz fellows. So I think it was really exciting to see that with not a lot of intimidation, but I'm sure the nerves were running rampant in there. And I think this is really just a testament to the supportive nature of the community, their interests, sincere interest in learning from one another, and desire to help each other succeed. In addition to that big event, the summer workshop, we sponsor smaller informal programming throughout the year to help leverage career advice and information from fellows. And finally, throughout the entirety of the fellowship, each of our in-school fellows is assigned a mentor that they meet with annually to discuss short-term goals and future career plans. And this is really an incredibly powerful mentoring relationship, oftentimes outside of the student's graduate advisor or their thesis committee. There's also a mentoring program hosted through the community that they've piloted. They're working on now scaling that up in the coming months. And that is open to fellows across the board. So in-school fellows, career fellows have the opportunity to be mentors, to be mentees, or both. And that's always fun to see somebody who's in that program who's getting mentorship, but also being a mentor. So I want to pause again, just really briefly, and ask our panelists, those that are willing to share any comments about the community and the mentorship aspects of the fellowship that you feel has impacted your graduate training. So open the floor.
I can start. Okay, what I will say is that when I was thinking about applying for the fellowship, I was planning on not applying because I thought there was absolutely no way in the world that I would ever get it. And then once I got it, I was like really terrified because I thought that everybody was going to be like a mad genius who was like really intimidating. And I was just extremely intimidated. And it turns out that actually everyone at the Hertz Fellowship is like a really nice, chill person who like is just like I would say is marked by like not like out of this world like brilliance and intimidation, but just like enthusiasm and like passion and boldness. Like everyone has like 7 interests that could all be a job. Like everyone is just extremely passionate and excited. That's like one of my favorite things about the Hertz community. It's a place where I can go and be as crazy and excited about things as I want. And everybody thinks that's normal. The other thing that I love regarding mentorship is that there are like so many like diverse paths that the fellows have taken. So any crazy idea that you have for your career, probably someone has already thought of it and tried it and has like $3 billion of funding to do it or something. So you can always get advice for like any crazy thing, and nobody's going to hear your idea and be like, that's way too big. Everyone's going to be like, oh, for sure, like I can help you with that. So that's something that I love about the community as well.
I would say I really like that there are people of different ages as part of this community. You know, it's great to have peers who are also kind of around my age, like doing grad school, going through grad school, and kind of we can share our struggles, but also kind of like motivate each other and tell us like what's worked. And on the other hand, you know, you also get to interact with some of the older mentors who are, you know, farther along in their career path. Several like professors that like continue to come, or like, you know, brand new professors. So to hear about like, you know, what's that journey like from kind of from the inside, which normally this kind of information you might not be so readily available, but you can, you know, ask your friends, so what is it actually like to do this? And so I think, yeah, having this diverse age range is really useful.
I'm a little bit further out than my fellow panelists, but I will say that the friends that I made when I was a grad student through the Hertz Foundation are still my friends. You know, they've persisted with me many, many, many years after I stopped being a fellow. You know, the professional support, the being able to chat with someone who's kind of going through the same career changes and career development, who's also passionate about what they do, maybe in a different field, but also, you know, super driven and passionate. It's a really, really wonderful community. I would say that you know, one of my first, actually my first industry job, which was at the time Google Life Sciences, I got through connections through the Hertz Foundation. You know, that I don't think it's a typical necessarily trajectory, but you know, the foundation and the events that we as fellows get invited to, it really it's a network, and it really helps later on, even beyond your fellowship years.
Great. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you, Bailey, for the great comments. So we'll talk about how do we get there, right? From application to now community member. And there's an application and a selection process involved in that. But before I go to the application side of things, I want to spend a few moments just on eligibility. And also note that there's a much more exhaustive FAQ on our website that addresses eligibility. But broadly speaking, the foundation supports graduate students, PhD students, as I said, working in the applied physical and biological sciences, math, and engineering. We take applied in a broad definition. So essentially, this means fields where one is applying, one is inventing and or developing results from basic physical sciences to generate solutions to problems of comparatively near-term widespread human interest. We don't direct the fellowships towards particular fields of study. And essentially in the application, we leave it up to each applicant to advocate regarding their specific area of interest as an applied physical science. In some cases, we've had applicants, and in a lot of these cases, they've gone on to secure the fellowship whose work might have been a little bit more theoretical in nature. However, in their application, they've demonstrated that ability to develop theory and methods with significant impacts on the physical sciences. And then, of course, the interview process is where we really test that. Had been able to show that they combine different aspects of knowledge and that really strong grounding in physical principles to advance discovery and create that impact. So if you have any doubt whether your work fits this applied definition, what I would do is encourage you to email fellowshipinfo@Hertz Foundation. That is an email address that's mined by myself and also our fellowship team. So before you embark on this application, getting clarity around what applied means, what it applied means to you. In some cases, we might have a little bit of back and forth, and we might actually vet that to our selection committee. Just to make sure and give you that encouragement to apply. So if there's any concerns outside of this webinar, just email me or email us directly, and we can clarify that. I also did want to reinforce what we recently noted, that our selection committee doesn't have quotas on specific disciplines that they intend to fund each selection cycle. So if you look on our website and you look over these different cohorts from year to year, you will essentially see that there's a very diverse composition of backgrounds. In some years it's a little bit more physics heavy, in some years maybe it's more bio heavy. For example, this past year we had 2 astronomy students that received a fellowship, and that ended like a 15-year streak that we had in astronomy. And I'm so happy that the 2 of them applied and didn't eliminate themselves, by looking through the website and not seeing anybody in astronomy for a decade plus. So super excited to have them as part of the community, and I think they'll contribute a lot with their background. Also want to quickly point out that the exact determination of how many fellowships we award each spring is approved by the board in the preceding fall. So in November, the board will vote to approve the target number of fellowships for the 2024 selection. Last year, there were 15 fellowships. We're expecting that number to stay in the same range, but the board will ultimately determine that exact target number in the fall, and then March will present a slate of candidates, and they'll determine how many they would fund. So due to our foundation's bylaws, fellowship recipients must be citizens or perm residents. Additionally, to ensure the maximum flexibility and freedom that this benefit provides, we focus on awarding fellowships early in the graduate student training. So therefore, we target applicants who are either currently college seniors or in their first year of graduate school, or those who might be in a gap year. And there's no maximum number of gap years, and there's also no age restriction. So if you've been out of school for 10 years and you'll be pursuing a PhD either this year or starting next year, you're eligible to apply. Another important point that I did want to make, because we get a lot of questions about this, is participating institutions. So if you look on the website, there's a list of participating institutions, and these are essentially schools where we have existing agreements that have accepted our terms for tuition and for stipend for an enrolled PhD student. And just to reinforce, you do not need to be currently attending one of these participating institutions to apply, nor do you need to petition your school at this time. So the graduate school that you intend to pursue does, however, need to be in the United States. And if you are awarded a fellowship and you plan to take it to a school that's not on the list, you can request to have them added at that time, or you can take the PhD to any of these existing partnership institutions, which is an interesting and very unique benefit. Also, in addition to having an applied focus, we expect fellowship recipients to direct their studies towards understanding of solving near-term problems facing the nation. And actually, part of our fellowship agreement that we ask each fellow to make this pledge is that they'll commit their skills and abilities for purposes of assisting the United States in times of national emergency. However, this commitment is not a contractual obligation. So just to be clear about that, we don't tell our fellows that the nation requires their action, and we have no definition for what constitutes a national emergency. We essentially leave it up to each fellow to determine in their own eyes whether the nation faces a serious challenge and if they're positioned to use that knowledge, their knowledge, skills, and abilities to address it. So very quickly, in terms of compensation, the fellowship provides renewable funding for up to 5 years with an annual stipend paid out over 9 months. The stipend was just increased for academic year 23 to 24 from 34 to 38,000. And the 9-month model encourages our fellows to use the summer to explore innovative research, to pursue internships, or secure additional training, as Bailey had mentioned. So this past summer, we saw fellows interning at a variety of different tech organizations, national labs, and nonprofits. Others stayed at their home institution or looked at other research opportunities outside their immediate lab, and a few just used the time to decompress and unwind. from the rigors of grad school. Also, another quick point is we do allow for stacking of fellowships. So unlike NSF and NDSEG, if you were to get the two of those together, you'd have to turn down one. However, that's not the case with Hertz. So we can stack on singular federal fellowships and many others, the most common being the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. So if you were to get that and Hertz together, you can combine those, and I can certainly talk more about that. And another benefit that we haven't seen a tremendous amount of fellows use, but I think it's very unique in that we offer a $5,000 additional stipend for childcare. So we have a few of our current in-schools that are utilizing that benefit as well. Okay, so now the fun. So I think what you're all here for, and what we're eagerly excited to learn more about, is the application process and the selection process. I'm going to go ahead and just give you that reminder that our application is open again until October 27th. And let me just walk you through a quick timeline, and then I'll hand things over to Jane to talk about what we look for in applicants at various phases, from the application to interviews, and then we'll draw on our panelists as well. So really quickly, the application closes October 27th, as I mentioned. Once it's closed, the applications will then go out to what we call pre-selectors. So each application gets a double read. So that's 2 individuals looking at every application. That's in November. After that, we'll make a decision, and we'll invite back 100-ish or so individuals to interview and do first-round interviews. Jane will talk about that. From those that are picked to advance from that, we then go to our finalist phase. That's our second-round interviewers, and we typically have 40 to 48-ish finalists that interview either in Boston or San Francisco with reimbursement provided. This is also a 2-person interview, but unlike the first interview, the second interview is not field matched. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And those that advance past the finalist interview, we have a fellowship selection meeting, which is in March. And at that meeting, a slate of fellowship recommendations are developed, and those are put to the board in March, and they ultimately approve the final decision of how many fellows that we will fund for that particular year. So we make the decision in March, we publicly announce it in May, and there's a long runway in there so that we can do a big splash announcement. And if you look on our website, you can see the 2023 fellows announcement. We have some fun videos with them talking about their research, their interview experience. But that time allows us and allows me to work with the fellowship recipients and also coordinating their funding. So often cases we have individuals who are received a fellowship, but they haven't decided where they're going to go to graduate school. So then this leverage gives them a lot of free agency in that process, and ultimately helps steer their decision in their direction of where they want to pursue their graduate training. So with that said, it is now my pleasure to turn it over to Jane to walk us through the application components and also what a selection committee is looking for in applicants. So Jane, the floor is yours.
Awesome. I'm going to try to do my best to talk through these, but I actually invite my fellow panelists to jump in if you have specific memories about your time when you did this, because actually you guys are much closer to this than I am. Just to give everyone a little bit of background, I have been interviewing on and off for the last 6 to 7 years with the Hertz Foundation. So during the interview process, I'm not one of the readers who kind of do the first screen of all of the applications, but I'm a first round interviewer, which means that for everyone who I'm going to meet and interview, I do read their applications as well. So I can kind of, give my perspective on what are the things that I look for in an application and the things that make an application really stand out to me. The first component of the application that I think is really important is the personal essay. And this is not a research proposal. So this is a little bit different from what you might do for some of your other graduate student fellowship, like NIH fellowships, for example. So the personal essay is really kind of meant to be an accounting of what your research but also how you thought about your research, the role that you played in your research. And it's kind of a free form place where you can really exhibit, or you can really talk about the creative elements that you added to your research. One of the things that we always look for is like, I read about a very lengthy, research project. I want to know which part you drove, not which part your lab drove or your postdoc mentor drove or something like that. I really want to hear about what, part of this whole thing you own. The short essays, the other essays that are part of the application process, those are meant to kind of frame your application in terms of where you want to go, what inspires you. I think most people won't actually have as much trouble with the part of the, is this a physical science or is this engineering? I think if you're on this call, this 2 months before the application is due, you're most likely someone who is looking at a physical science or engineering degree. And if you have any questions, I really invite you to email the fellowship to ask whether your field of study qualifies. The chronological synopsis is kind of meant to give us a flavor for what you went through and how you developed as a scientist. This could be things, summer internships that you did, in high school even, all the way to the present, times where you worked in one lab during your undergraduate, different projects or teams that you were on. Again, creativity is such an important piece of what we look for, and things that differentiate you from another candidate who just, took lab courses. Which part of this did you drive? Which parts of these things did you take the initiative on? And then the last piece, research projects, that is more, I think, in line with maybe what some other fellowships ask for, which is more of a scientific overview of things that you've worked on and pursued. And again, creativity comes up 3 times in these 4 bullet points. So, you guys can get a feel for how important that is to us and to the foundation when we select fellows. Do you guys have anything to add, Bailey or Nikhil?
Yeah, I can add something. Okay, so I guess like this is like a little bit higher level. But when sort of thinking about writing this application, like I think there's a lot of at least this was how it was for me. I started with this sort of perception of what I thought a really good applicant would look like. And I like read all the bios of the people who had it and I was like, "Oh my God, like I have to be exactly like them." Like you kind of but I think that that's the wrong approach. I think the right approach is to like be the most yourself that you possibly can. Like forget about everyone else. Like you have to just trust yourself and be the most intense version of yourself that you can. Because I think genuineness and like genuine curiosity and like genuine passion is what will like propel you like through this process. At least that's my experience talking to the people who I know who have gotten the fellowship.
That's a really great point. I have to say, when someone's really passionate about their research, that jumps off the page. You can tell. So that's great advice.
Okay, so since Bailey took the high level, I'll do the low level. I know this is for my application. I haven't seen a bunch of applications, so maybe this was just me like letting my authentic optimization kind of personality stream kind of come through. But basically, like I repurposed a bunch of text from my PhD personal statements for many of the short essays. I mean, I don't think this is a bad thing. You spent a lot of time thinking about like that personal statement. So like, copying and pasting and kind of editing around to answer the questions, in my view, was totally fine. The rest of these written components, I found pretty straightforward. My chronological synopsis was basically like my resume, except in plain text format with all the like, formatting stripped out. It was bullets, right? So I think the one thing that I wrote from scratch was the personal essay, because there wasn't anything like this on my other apps. And also, I mean, I feel like this essay is really a good opportunity for you to let your personality shine through and not necessarily do like more research. Like some advice I got from previous say fellows was like they wrote about like art or something like that. And mine was about like my interest in digital maps of information. And now this wasn't kind of just like totally random, like it was, this is a precious space to convey information. So through this essay, and on this theme of kind of being interested in digital maps, I was able to tie in like some of the open source projects that I had been doing regarding like, graphic design, some of the works that I had done in video, like when I was younger, and also like some tool that I'd built for visualizing the brain, right? So this was all like around this theme, which is like a genuine passion of mine. But like I would also say, this isn't like, necessarily, when they say creative, they don't mean like, write poetry, right? They mean like you want to convey information that isn't being conveyed in the other essays.
Yeah, just to add a data point to this, like my personal essay was on tutoring a student, but then I connected it back into how the creativity I used in that process of like writing curriculum is the exact way that I approach problems in research. So writing about something that's like sort of at its core unrelated, but then tying it in, I think, like Nikhil, I think that's like a pretty good approach for the personal essay.
Awesome, awesome, awesome advice. Yeah, so what we look, I should have saved my creativity comment for this slide. What we look for applicants, definitely people who have deep scientific and technical knowledge in their fields of interest. And when I say that, it becomes quite obvious as an interviewer when someone is learning something because someone told them to, versus they have a passion for it and they are really curious about it. The person who is really curious and has really like tried to own their domain, you ask them things that are on the periphery of what they've worked on, and they have an answer for everything. They have thought of the question before you ask the question, right? And so that is the kind of like depth that we really value. Again, creative problem solvers. I find that people who are able to, maybe take concepts from one field and apply them to another, or be kind of comfortable in the bridge between two fields. That's a really cool space that we like. But also, just like creatively solving really, really hard problems. Sometimes the hardest problems, if you bring some perspective that is different from the way that people have looked at it before, that's definitely super valuable as well. As Derek mentioned, we want to find applicants who are committed to solving real world problems. It's an applied fellowship. And the legacy of the Hertz is tied to strengthening our nation. Yeah, the last bullet point, I think, it kind of just re-emphasizes what we talked about before. Active leaders, everyone who is I've met through the Hertz Foundation, they have the drive, they have the passion, they've become leaders in their own field, if not during their time of their graduate career, later on. And so, we want to find individuals who want and can be at that level.
Great. And I know we're going to have, just to make sure we free up plenty of time for questions, I'll go through some of these pretty quickly and then kick some of the questions over to our panelists. But one thing I did want to share, if you look through the Hertz website, you're going to see the fellowship, the year that it was awarded, and then the graduate institution where that individual took their fellowship. And what it doesn't, it's not necessarily reflective of as where that student was when they applied to the fellowship. So it doesn't really showcase the breadth of undergraduate institutions. So just looking across, the last decade plus of cohorts, you can see that we have a much more breadth and depth as far as undergraduate institutions. Also looking at field of study. So not to get discouraged, if you look at, the 2023 announcement, you see all these physics and all this computer science, and you might be sitting in another applied discipline. As I said, we had two, I think 3 astronomy students in the last 3 years, and 2 of them got the fellowship. So there you go. I think perfect case in point for you have to apply, right? Okay, so I know Bailey had some comments around this. This is not we'll say, as we approach the application, thinking about this, maybe a little bit of encouragement of why you should apply. So maybe if you're on the fence and you're not thinking that this is the right fellowship for you. So I'll let Bailey provide some commentary on that.
Okay, well, it'll be pretty short. Plus, I think I already said my commentary earlier, but yeah, basically, I mean, it depends on why you're on the fence about applying. The reason I was on the fence was because I thought that I would never get it, and I was extremely intimidated by the resumes that I read on the Hertz website. There are a lot of reasons that people underestimate themselves. You should definitely apply if that's the reason that you're on the fence, because I think expectation about whether you're going to get it is not a very good proxy for whether or not you have a good chance. I think a lot of my friends at the fellowship were either in the category of people who almost didn't apply or applied, but they were like, there's no way that I would ever get this. So if that's how you feel, don't let it stop you. You can totally do it. That's all I want to say about that.
Thanks, Bailey. So the other thing I did want to highlight, which is essentially a critical part of the application, and going into a little bit more depth than we did last year on this, and just making sure that leveling the playing field and everyone really understands what important role that references play in the application. So references, we call them recommenders. So you're going to hear the word interchangeably between references and recommenders. They are a large part of the process. We actually require 4. And one of the things that's a little bit unique to Hertz is it's not a cookie cutter letter that's sent to us. So what we do when you fill out your application is you're going to select your 4 references. You'll put in their contact information, and it will immediately send them a notification to fill out a rubric. There's a short rubric in there that just asks them to evaluate different things from your background. And then there's a form that goes along with it. And there's a short series of questions, which, if you're working with your references, and I know Nikhil has some really good practical advice that I'll turn to him in a second for working with references. They don't have to be long, exhaustive, a letter for each one of those. A couple sentences would be sufficient. But really, this is an opportunity to provide that external validation to you, where they can talk about how special you are, how you've approached things independently, how you have this creative spark that you're bringing to their lab or to the work. So it's really an opportunity for them to endorse you as it relates to this fellowship. And it might be a little different from your NSF or your other recommendation letters. But it is very much a technical reference. Definitely, we do want some of the interpersonal things in there, but really a focus on those attributes that Jane had mentioned in the previous slides. And the last thing that I would say is start this early. So we're only 3 days into this application process. This is probably, and I don't know, Nikhil, Bailey, you guys can all probably counter this, but this is probably one of the more intensive parts of the application, because you're relying on other people to do things for you, right? And it comes down to the wire, and you don't want it to be October 26th or 27th, and you're looking at the clock waiting for these references to come through. So I would say be proactive, go early, and choose wisely. But I know Nikhil has great things to say about this, having recently gone through it. So Nikhil, please.
Yeah, so I'll again provide some kind of meaty details. So I guess, well, first of all, one thing I've heard is that like these references are really important for getting past that first stage, right, to getting to an interview. So that's like really where it's most used from what I've heard on the inside. Now, in terms of like who I got writing things for me, I had 3 professors who had agreed to write me a letter and who, kind of used that letter for the rest of the grad school. And then I also had, 1 postdoc that wrote for me specifically for Hertz, because it's the only one that requires 4, I think. So, okay, so here's one of the things I did, and I feel like is will be very helpful for you. What I did was I compiled like a Google Doc, one for each recommender, with what I called like kind of information relevant for writing me a letter. And what's in that Google Doc is like the role. So like, what time did I work with you for? Like, how long did I work for? Like, what did I do? Right? Like, just so that information is kind of collected there. And then I also wrote like some anecdotes about like our time together. And these anecdotes were grouped by themes. So like, I might have a section for enthusiasm, a section for problem solving, right? And under like problem solving, I will have like an anecdote like, oh, remember when we were doing this in this like thing, and like, it didn't work so well, and then I got it working well, right? Like these anecdotes are really useful, particularly I think like for the longer letters that maybe the same recommenders will be writing you for grad school. But also, the goal of this is to kind of make it easy for them because they're busy. And also they have a ton of things going on. So they might have forgotten like the specific relationships or the things that you have done, right? So I think compiling these anecdotes and kind of this information just makes it easier for them. They're doing you a favor after all. And also one thing I would do is I had like links to like Google Docs or slides that I had used like during lab meetings. So it's evidence-based, right? So like rather than just saying, oh, problem solving, here was the anecdote, I might like link there to like our February meeting when like we discussed these things.
Thank you, Nikhil. Such rich, great advice. That was awesome. Let's see, just moving along quickly. So I know Jane talked a little bit about the interview process, and I know there's a bunch of questions rolling through the Q&A. There's some really fast ones that we'll get to, and then there's probably a little bit more long-winded ones. But Jane, I don't know if you wanted to comment maybe for a few minutes just about the interview process, and then our panelists, if they want to share any experience in prepping for that. I know that's post-application phase, but those thinking proactively.
Yeah, so I asked that we talk about the interview process in this webinar a little bit because I found that when I don't remember very much about the Hertz application process, but I remember fearing the interviews. And so, I think that this is like a common thing that even after you're a Hertz fellow, you're still talking about your interviews. So I just want to try to demystify that process as much as possible. Your first round interview is usually field match. This means that, if you're a chemist, you may be asked biochemistry questions. You may be asked, questions that are peripheral to what you really know. But you probably won't be asked astrophysics questions. So, we do a really good job nowadays of, picking interviewers and matching them with interviewees where there's a lot of mutual interest in certain fields. And, the interview process is again an opportunity for you to demonstrate your creativity and for the applicant to demonstrate how they think, whether they've become domain experts in what they've researched or worked on in the past, whether they had that curiosity to go chase down and pull on various threads that may have come up in their undergraduate research. I think that the interview process, not just the facts that we discuss and things like that, but just kind of like watching interviewee like solve a problem. A lot of times the interview questions tend to be open-ended questions. There's no right answer. There's just kind of like list as many of these possibilities as you can, or talk through how you would approach this very difficult thing. And so again, it's all about your thought process and how you're able to kind of distill maybe complex things into things that you can sink your teeth into.
So again, we are open. We're open for business. The Hertz application is now live.